Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly wrap. Mirko, how are you, my friend? How are you going?
Yeah, going real well. Going real well. Up in sunny Brisbane the last few days, so we're an hour behind here. So I'm assuming it's 9 o'clock in Melbourne, if I got
No,
that
no,
right.
no. It's actually 8 o'clock in Melbourne, so you're at 7 o'clock your time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's thank you very much. That's right. Thanks for that. I get now I recall what happened here. I suggested we go 9 o'clock your time, and you said, "Mate, I've got a meeting on. Can we do it at 8?" And I go, "Yeah, that's fine. That'll be 7 here." So
Yeah,
so I haven't had my coffee yet, guys. So I may not be my perky self just yet.
mate. You without a coffee is not good.
Yeah, I know. Let's hope we don't have any tech issues or something. It could get ugly.
No, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, look, thank you for joining me this morning, mate. And how is Bris Vegas? Is the weather good?
Yeah, it's all right. It's good. It's actually a lot drier than usual. You know, you get that humidity in Brisbane, so it seems to be the dry time of year. So it's quite pleasant.
Yeah, no. It's a good part of the world, and I was lucky enough to be up there with you on Wednesday and Thursday, and Brisbane's definitely come along, and there's a far better vibe in Brisbane, I felt, than probably what we feel here in Melbourne at times.
Yeah, there was plenty of people around the town, and they weren't just tourists because the Australian Open was on. No, it was all happening. It was actually good to see.
Yeah, no. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, mate, how about a quick market update going on in the world? And we've got
Yeah,
a
for
to
sure.
get through. So, how'd we go?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, ended up the week in the green. Pretty good. We had a short week in Australia. We had Australia Day public holiday on the Monday, so we've only had 3 days of trading so far, with today to come. But yeah, we're up about 0.5% here. US is up about zero point 0.7. Nasdaq is up about 0.79. Although last night was sort of a bit of volatile trading with a bit of move out of the tech sector. Some of the big tech names got towed up a little bit last night. So we watched that space, and perhaps a bit of a turn into some of the stocks that aren't so reliant on the thematic of AI. A few data points this week as well. The US had a federal rates decision. We had inflation results come out in Australia, so I'm sure we'll discuss those things as well at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the stocks that I'm interested in is Spotify. It's probably one of my favorite apps. The amount of music that we listen to, I know in our household, is extraordinary, and the version is something a real blast from that point of view. And everyone you speak to seems to have a Spotify account, and the share price is down 40%. And part of the reason, or give price reduction, the impact of AI singers and AI artists. So they're saying they're not real artists, and AI are now creating their own music from that point of view. And Spotify knowing that has meant that people have said, actually, we don't know what's real and what isn't real, so we're not going to listen to it anymore, and cancelling subscriptions. So it's amazing how AI on one side is causing ramifications on another side. So it's just an interesting take on that one.
Yeah, it could be a few people bringing out the guitars, getting those guitar lessons out again, eh?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned inflation in your market update, and thanks for doing so. I believe the Australian number came out on Wednesday, and I think that came in at 3.8% for the year, which isn't good, Mirko. And it's something that we've been a little bit worried about, because at 3.8, that's outside the bandwidth, and that tells us that rates are only going one way, and that's up. All had their rate thing. You want to delve into that a little bit further?
Yeah, so inflation, you're right. Headline inflation rate came in for the 12 months up until December at 3.8, which is up from 3.4 at the end of November. So we're sitting here now, sort of thinking, have we done something horribly wrong in Australia when it comes to the inflation rate? Because it certainly seems to be very sticky, to put it politely. So for the mortgage holders that were hoping for rate cuts in February, I don't think we're going to see that. And there's plenty of economists saying that the next rate movement may well be a hike as opposed to a cut in Australia. In the US, on the other hand, they had their inflation rate discussions. They had their the Federal Reserve meet this week as well. They've kept their rates on hold, and they're sort of sitting at about 3.5, 3.75. I think that what will happen in the US, they've gone off the back of 3 rate cuts in 2025, and they would want to see a softer labour market before they have rate cuts over there. Comments from Jerome Powell was certainly that the US economy looks stronger than it actually did last year. So I thought that was a good point. And again, even over there, market then says, okay, so will we actually see any more rate cuts in the US? Markets were a little bit disappointed with all that. And off the back of that, I did see coming out of Davos and following up from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, predicting global growth of about 3.3% for 2.26. So the expectation is that globally the economy is in reasonable shape, but still quite a heavy reliance on the tech sector to get us over the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the interesting things I saw that came out of the World Bank was talking about living standards across the world, and if you look, they had a look at the advanced economies, and so at the end of 2025, we saw that advanced economies enjoyed per capita incomes exceeding their 2019 levels. So they were comparing back to 2019. However, in developing economies, 1 in 4 developing economies actually had a lower per capita income. So there's certainly a pretty significant divide, and I think we sort of see that in our own, in our own backyards. In truth,
Mm-hmm.
the haves and the have-nots. Interesting set of numbers and sort of a take on global growth and how it's running at different paces in different parts of the world.
Yeah, look, I just reading the articles that came out this week and just looking at the data points. I think Australia's got a real problem at the moment, particularly at an inflation level where I'm not convinced it's transactional, Mirko. I don't think there hasn't been a spike from a transactional point where you might say, well, this has caused it, or it was a government, a government free kick or whatever from that point of view, which caused a spike. This feels structural, and this was one of the problems, because we always said this, like once wages and all that kind of stuff start to increase, that's inbuilt into the system. Prices then automatically have to rise to cover the increases in cost, and that stays. That doesn't disappear. So unless you've got growth, and I think for the Reserve Bank, there's a couple of challenges here. Is if mortgage holders want some respite, we're going to need the Australian government to do some heavy lifting here as well through fiscal policy, because we can't just solely rely on monetary, because monetary policy, it's a blunt instrument. Interest rates are either going up or down. They're not doing anything else. And given the current trajectory, they're going up. So unless the government does something from a fiscal perspective, and that means scaling back spending, perhaps trimming back department spend, whatever it might be, some of the incentives that sit out there, some of the middle class welfare that we see, unless some of this gets pared back, we're going to be in trouble, or even, heaven forbid, increasing taxes. So I think Jim Chalmers and the Labor Party have got they've got a bit of hard work in front of them the next couple of months, and this budget's going to be an interesting one.
When do we head into the next federal election? That's in a couple of years' time, yeah?
Yeah, we're still a while out from that one.
Yeah.
But I think this budget here, on the back of, like, they won the election last year, so this is their big budget that they can come out and introduce some of this structural reform. Will they be brave enough to do so? I think they have to, because if they don't, then interest rates are going to keep on going up higher. So it'll be an interesting one to see how that all transpires.
Well, if we're going to talk politics, I reckon the way the Liberal Party's going, they can do whatever they want. They'd still be untouchable.
Well, yeah, look, and I'm pleased you raised that, because yesterday, Katie Allen, I actually had the pleasure of meeting her once. She was actually a wonderful human being and a wonderful politician. Spoke really well, and she was the epitome of what I think Liberal values are. She was able to listen to both sides of the story and provide a measured response that wasn't hysterical, either left or right. She was very much a moderate and very much in the middle, and spoke of common sense. And unfortunately, she passed away very quickly from that point of view. And yesterday was a day of reflection, in truth. But the Liberal Party, to their credit, using the day of reflection to sit back and have Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie, sit there, figure out how they can actually go and take over the leadership from Susan Ley, which you're looking at the Libs and you're thinking, like, you are a pack of, yeah. Look, I'll go for it, but I'm not going to say it because I don't think it's appropriate this early in the morning.
I reckon most people that know you on the screen know exactly what you were thinking right there.
I just, I just sit back and think, seriously, when are you going to stop thinking about yourself? Just for 5 minutes, for Christ's sake. The woman's not even being buried. It's explored by the lips. And for once, for once in their lives, they need to stop thinking about self and actually start thinking about the Australian people. Because the Australian people, particularly here in Victoria, we desperately need an opposition. And from an Australian perspective, and this is not a criticism of Albo and Chalmers, they're doing what they're doing, but in order to keep honest, we actually need a strong opposition.
You certainly do, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether we look at state or federal level. We don't seem to be able to get that, and when you don't have accountability and an opposition breathing down your neck, it's very easy to get away with whatever the hell you want to get away with, which is exactly what we seem to see.
Yeah, true that. True that. Now, mate, I want to talk about the gold price surge. This, like gold, the other day surged past $5,000 US an ounce, and then within 3 days was up to 5,500 per ounce. I think it's now pulled back to 5,300. There's strong demand. People are lining up in front of the mint. They're going out buying bullion blocks. They're doing all this sort of stuff. Is this market hyperbole, as in an opportunistic play, or is this a reflection of how unstable the world is and what our view of the world is, that it's all going to shizen?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm thinking of these people lining up to buy gold. I had a rule that has worked well in my 50 odd years, and that has been never line up for anything. And I certainly ain't lining up to buy gold, that's for sure. But I look at what is driving all of this, and it's 100%. It's the geopolitical tensions that seem to be driving this uncertainty. People head to gold. There's some pretty funny memes doing the rounds at the moment where you've got the current generation crypto holders, and then you've got the baby boomers with the gold, and the baby boomers just having a bit of a chuckle in the background with the crypto trader in tears. But I think what we're seeing now is also an underlying question mark that doesn't seem to want to go away about the lack of strength of the US dollar. Now, remember, everybody sort of pins the US dollar as the key currency globally. I don't know that that's still such a dominant currency in the world, and I think that's why we're now starting to see gold. Silver is also an interesting metal that is absolutely flown. Difference between silver, though, it's actually got quite a few industrial uses as well. So in manufacturing particularly. So look, this is the rapid rate of rise that we've seen. This is sort of for those that can remember that back in the 70s, sort of gold went from it was $35 an ounce to 800, over that next decade. So this could be the run that gold is sort of having, and I think that the gold price is actually giving us a very good indication as to what market expectations are and what volatility expectations are, and the more of the chaos that we seem to endure and seem to have going on around us, the more you'll see the gold price in action as well. But having said all that, would I be rushing out to buy this stuff? When this stuff pulls back, it pulls back pretty hard as well. So just when you're thinking about these sort of plays, I suggest you take a overall asset allocation look and just to make sure you've got your exposures correct, because the price of metals can be extremely volatile, just as the geopolitics that we're experiencing is right now.
Yeah, no, and look, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is the weaker US dollar driving this stuff. It's also the high level of global debt, which is causing some concern, and people are just sitting back going, well, how long is this sustainable? And if everything goes to shit, for the want of a better phrase, but if everything was to go there, in theory, I'm holding on to gold, which is a valuable commodity and has been a valuable commodity throughout history. So it's always been your foolproof thing. Problem with gold is you can't eat it, you can't drink it, outside of melting it. So it's it's one of those commodities where you kind of sit back and think, yeah, it's nice to have, but I'm not sure what value it is if everything else has gone pear-shaped. Now, mate, just when you thought things couldn't get any sillier, there's news coming out of India and Asia at the moment about a new virus called Nipah. And it's a virus which has fatality rates somewhere between 40 to 75%, causes severe brain inflammation and respiratory illness from that point of view. And it spreads between fruit bats into humans, which is kind of weird, but it's done through the contamination of food. So at the moment, they've got it as something that they're talking about potentially maybe shutting down some borders in order to contain this thing. I'm not being an alarmist by any stretch of the imagination, but heaven forbid, it just takes you straight back to COVID and you start to have the shakes again when you hear this sort of stuff. And the US electing to step out of the WHO, as in the World Health Organization as well. Now, what could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And I must admit, I knew nothing about this until you mentioned it. And the minute I punched it into the Google machine, the first headline that came up, if you want to be alarmist, was that it's 75 times more deadly than the coronavirus. I'm going to pose a question here. If heaven forbid something did happen like that, how do you reckon we'd go in Victoria if they said, Luke, you now have an 8 p.m. curfew, you're not allowed to leave your house? How do you reckon that'd go this time around?
Yeah, no, I don't like chances, my friend. I don't like their chances. But look, given Victoria's Stockholm syndrome, it wouldn't surprise me if Dan all of a sudden back with his cape and undies on the outside of his pants, for God's sake.
Maybe as a $4,000 a day consultant or something. Nothing would surprise me. Don't worry about that.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. Mate, it'd be remiss of us to speak about the US quickly, and I'm conscious of time, but I was watching Scott Bessent the other day. He was giving an interview and all that stuff. And one thing I want to write, Scott's no goose. Scott's a Wall Street guy. He understands markets, really intelligent bloke. And there are rumours going around that this is his tilt for the presidency. So being in the head of Trump's economic policy from that point of view, he's positioning himself as a future role there. But the thing I nearly choked on my Wheaties as I was listening to Scott speak, he said, he acknowledged the fact that cost pressures in the United States were rising and that some people were hurting. Now, this is the same bloke who said, the mums and dads who own 10 or 12 properties and thinking that was normal. Like he said, that was the baseline, but that's a separate argument. He was suggesting that the reason for the cost pressures and all this kind of stuff was Joe Biden's policies. I'd hate to remind Scott, he's been in power for 12 months. And I'll argue and say that it's got nothing to do with Joe Biden, but it's actually got to do with tariffs and the tariffs that you introduced and said that countries would pay and not the consumer. What's your view?
If you're going to look for someone to blame, they actually need to be alive, and they needed to be alive a couple of years ago. And like, really, isn't the first thing you try and teach your children some accountability and to just put your hand up, say, yep, my problem, I made that error, I will fix it. No, not in this case, and that seems to be the trend. Everywhere I turn these days, and no one's prepared to sort of say, yeah, my mistake, our problem, we'll own it. And I think that's why we find ourselves where we do.
I think the level of the audaciousness of this administration to sit there and, we're seeing things with our own eyes, we're hearing things with our own ears, and yet they're telling you an alternative truth. And, it's this belief or mindset that they've got where they kind of go, well, if I say it enough times, people start to believe this rubbish. And it's just like, you can't unsee what you see. You can't unfeel what you feel, or you can't unknow what you know. It's just the way it is. And it's just, I look at somebody like a Bessent and think, you're not a goose, but God, you look like a real goose with the way you're talking and the rubbish that's coming out of your mouth makes no sense.
But yeah, these guys are all cut from the same cloth, and when they start, giving you the facts, their version of events, and you're right, the more times they say it, the more believable that it actually becomes. And the problem we have today is that social media has an unbelievable ability to get messages out there that have no sense, perhaps based on no truths in many instances, yet people will be talking about it on Main Street, which is crazy. But, that never used to be an issue before, whereas now if you get the algorithm right, you get the platform right, and you get the right person to click a like or repost something, it's game on.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'm just mindful of time, and mindful you've got a very busy day today, I know, in Brisbane from that point of view. What are the plans for the weekend, mate? Anything exciting?
With a bit of luck, I will hang around here for the weekend and enjoy a bit of sun before heading back home. So hopefully the weather holds up and I can relax a little bit.
No, magnificent, magnificent. Well, you've missed a cracking weekend down in Melbourne, mate. I think we're 30s on the weekend. It's actually quite pleasant, and that stupidity of Tuesday where you felt like you were going to get scorched into the earth. I think at one stage it was like I got into the car, it was like 47. It was just like Jesus, that is just not. One thing I will suggest is do not buy a car with black leather seats. Never a good idea. But we're back to normal here in Melbourne, so you'll be missed on the weekend. So, but you enjoy your time up there.
No, it definitely will, and I'll be keenly watching the business end of the Australian Open. That's for sure. So women's finals decided last night, and men's semis tonight, followed by the final on Sunday. So yeah, it should be good. Good time to be around.
I kind of missed. I've missed. I know Sabalenka's made the women's final in the men's semis. Who's against who? Alcaraz versus.
Yeah. So interesting. Fun fact: all the top four seeds in the semis, which is by ranking, that's the way it should be. So Alcaraz, Zverev, and Sinner v Djokovic. So just take your pick about how good those games are going to be. So and last night Rebecca joining Sabalenka in the final. Interesting. No shaking of hands between Sabalenka and Svitolina due to the what's been happening in Ukraine, Russia, and that. And I think it's pretty sad that the Australian Open had to sort of go out before the game and actually say, hey guys, just so you're aware, these players won't be shaking hands after the game, because the last time it happened there was actually some booing and whatnot. And it's like, guys, it's sport, and we should be able to leave this stuff on the sidelines, but that's certainly not the case.
No, it's not, mate. It's not, and I think stuff like this, and you're going to see it now. The Winter Olympics is coming up in Cortina in Milan, so you'll probably see more of this sort of stuff. As it's just. I always think you should separate sport from politics from that point of view, because I think at the end of the day, sport is one of those things that brings us together. And when we start to put the dividers in that sort of space, we're just normalising that sort of behaviour, which I don't think is right.
Mind you, given the tennis analogy, the way some of these guys serve, you'd think that they were launching bombs and rockets from the other side of the court. I would not like to be standing on the other side of the court, let me tell you.
One thing I will say about Sabalenka, she has got those arms and those shoulders on her. She is as strong as an ox. Beautiful, beautiful woman, and a wonderful player as well. But just the strength of her.
It's interesting, the two women that make the final, Rebecca and Sabalenka, the two biggest hitters on the women's tour. So, that power game is certainly dominant.
Yeah, if you remember in the old days, it used to be Serena Williams, and it was her by herself, and everybody else was nowhere near it. All of a sudden now there's more of that type of prototype. So
my petite finesse game is not going to cut it on the tour, unfortunately, which explains why I'm doing weekly wrap, but it's all good.
You know what, mate, I'm absolutely loving the fact that you're on the wrap and you're here with me, mate. So look, mate, bidding you a wonderful weekend. To all our wonderful clients out there, thank you for joining us as always. May you have a wonderful weekend. Be safe on the roads. If you're having a drink, a nice Negroni always goes down well on a nice day. So just enjoy that, yeah? All right, guys, take care. All the very best.
There you guys. Good weekend.
Cheers. Bye-bye.